Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Returning to the show tonight is Mr. Neil Sanders. In our previous discussions with Neil, he has shared his in-depth knowledge and expertise in the field of mind control. Tonight, however, we're going to switch gears a bit and talk to Neil about his hypnosis practice, Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy. We discuss what hypnosis is and what it's not, and of course, the many types of issues and conflicts that can be resolved by visiting a skilled practitioner like Neil. Neil's website defines hypnosis as a very deep state of relaxation that allows the therapist to bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to the subconscious in order to make the positive changes the client is seeking. And with that backdrop, we pick up the discussion with Neil as he is explaining the role of the subconscious mind in the hypnosis process. Let's take a listen.
And when we're talking about what the subconscious mind is, basically the school of thought, which basically comes from psychoanalysis, really, is that the human mind has got three parts, really. It's got the conscious mind, which is everything that we're considering now, the things that you have to think about in present reality, what you're going to say next, how you're going to react. Oh, that's a nice thing that I've seen out the corner of my eye. All the sort of things that you are thinking. You've then got your subconscious, and then there's your unconscious as well. And what your sub and unconscious do is they tend to organize the automatic responses, things that you need to do but you don't want to have to think about. Like, for example, if I want to pick up a pen, there's a hugely complicated number of muscles and reflexes and synaptic responses that have to go. Now, luckily, my subconscious mind has learnt all of those actions, so I can do that without actually having to think about it. Another example, a more terrestrial example, would be typing, for example. Like when I first started typing, I had to very consciously look for each letter and press it down and check the screen and make sure I'd put the right one in and everything like that. And until all of a sudden you absorb this into your subconscious mind and it becomes an automatic process. You get muscle memory and you get response techniques and stuff like that. So basically it becomes a habit or something that you've learnt. And often, or more often than not, unpleasant things that people wish to sort of treat with hypnosis, for example, nail biting, comfort eating, smoking, for example, they're habits. They're things that you've learnt to do and you've become accustomed to do, and so it's become sort of locked in your subconscious mind as an action. And so that's why hypnosis is effective at getting rid of it. Because often, for example, if you could talk or think the problem through, say you've got like anger issues, and if you could sit there and rationally think why I shouldn't do this or whatever, then that's a conscious problem. That's something that you could deal with perhaps counselling or something like that. But if there's like an impetus that you can't seemingly control, that basically it's an automatic response, or it seems like it just bubbles up from nowhere, that's a subconscious response. That's a learnt action that your brain has learnt and may well have been useful at one point, but now it's actually causing you problems.
In many of those situations, Neil, and it sounds like that talk therapy or psychotherapy might not be a quick solution. It might take many years with talk therapy in order to work through something, if you're even able to break that barrier. Because I think what you're saying is you have to break through that conscious mind barrier to get into that subconscious, unconscious mind in order to make that change, that behavioral change.
Yes, absolutely. Because as I say, the responses are not something that you actually want to do. You're not consciously saying, yes, this is how I will react to a situation. But if you think of your brain like a computer, or the school of thought that I come from is that basically your action at one point served a purpose, and so that's your sort of default reaction to every situation like that from then. You at one point realized that perhaps when you were very young, that reacting to a set of circumstances by screaming and being very, very loud and boisterous and angry, that achieved the result that was favorable to you. And because the brain usually works with pure logic, it goes, okay, that worked on this occasion, there's no reason to think that won't work on every single other occasion. And then obviously, as you do it more and more and more, it compounds it. Or alternatively, what can happen is that a circumstance will have happened when you're quite young, you were embarrassed or something happened and you reacted again in a sense of pure logic, and that was stored really in your head until much later in life another incident happened that brought up these unpleasant feelings. And so basically your brain was racking its sort of memory banks trying to find out what is an appropriate response, how have I coped with a situation like this before, and then that would bring up the symptoms. So this is perhaps why people might develop a symptom like nail biting, or well, I mean, it can be anything really, but they might develop a symptom later in life, when certain pressures get too much for them, or something happens basically.
Now, Neil, a lot of times, and you and I have spoken about this before, so we don't have to go into great detail, but sometimes some clients might be concerned that hypnosis is mind control, that in some way as a practitioner, that you're going to have control over them. Is that the case or not?
No, no more than a mechanic has control of an engine. You have to let them sort of get in there, and even then, basically, no, not at all, really. If you're halfway through a hypnotic session and you don't like the way it's going, you have the power to open your eyes and stand up and walk out. You are aware of what's going on. It's not like you're. A lot of people basically did. I think I've said this to you. People think it's like the Vulcan nerve pinch, where basically you're unconscious and you don't have any awareness or anything, and then you'll wake up later and go, "Oh, wow, what's happened?" Or that somebody will tinker with your brain and make you do something that you don't want to do, and none of those things are possible. You can't make somebody do something that they don't want to do. If you feel uncomfortable at any time, you can open your eyes and stand up. It's a very, very nice experience. You can hear everything. The only thing that will be slightly strange is you'll feel incredibly heavy, and very, very relaxed and very calm, almost as if you've just sort of woken up after a very relaxing sleep. And you might have what's called time dilation, which is basically you might assume that, well, that was only 10 minutes, and then you check your watch and it's actually been half an hour. And but that's because you're so relaxed. That, I mean, that can happen with well, it happens in car journeys. I mean, that's a good example actually, because that's an example of how you would fall into a hypnotic state, because you're driving to work, say, and you're getting into a bit of traffic and stuff like that, and then your mind starts to slip and you start to think, oh, I wonder what I'll have for dinner tonight, and I'll do this and what's, and before you know, you've either gone the wrong way and then you snap into it and go, oh no, I'm going to be late, I need to turn left, or alternatively you suddenly realize you're at the gates of where you work, and you're like, oh, how did I get here? Well, who drove the car? Well, you drove the car, but what happened was your conscious mind was distracted, and the automatic process, because you know how to drive a car, the automatic reflex actions just took place, and you went into what we call autopilot. And basically you're able to do that, and at the second that anything would require your conscious reaction, like when you realize you're late, like when you realize you've arrived at work, like when somebody steps out in front of you, you suddenly go, oh dear, and press the brakes, and you'll be perfectly okay. But that is essentially what you're trying to achieve with hypnosis, is to try and get somebody into that state. The other example that I always say to a client, if they're worried that they might not be able to be hypnotized, I said, well, there's 2 points. You will be able to be hypnotized if you will allow me to hypnotize you, because I'm also of the school of thought that a hypnotist doesn't really hypnotize somebody per se, but he creates the scenario for somebody to go into hypnosis, basically. And then the other thing that I say is have you ever cried at a film? And obviously the majority of people have. They've cried at a film, or they've felt emotion at a song or something like that. Now that is an example of the bypass of your critical analysis, because you know that the lady at the end of Beaches didn't really die, but you can empathize with it. Even though you know that that's an actor and this is a fiction, what you've done is you've allowed your critical analysis to bypass, and you're in touch directly with your subconscious empathetic side. And so that's why you feel these things. And so if that happens to you, then yes, you are a suitable candidate for hypnosis.
So then it sounds like hypnosis, or being in a trance state, is a natural state of consciousness that we go in and out during the course of the day.
Well, it certainly seems that. I mean, the thing is, there is as you know, there's different schools of thought, and very, very eminent people debate this. But yes, basically, it feels akin to daydreaming, when when basically you sat there and somebody's talking to you, and then you just start staring out the window, and then all of a sudden you go, I'm terribly sorry, I just completely zoned out there. That's basically what it feels like. You can hear the sort of in the background because you're still awake, but you're just not consciously taking note of it. And so that's really the job of a hypnotist, is to distract the conscious mind by these numerous techniques. As I'm sure you can make them think of a relaxation scale. Imagine walking down some steps. Imagine walking around a garden. You can imagine them sinking lower or floating on a lake. Anything really. Just to basically watch a television show is usually a good one. Just so that basically they're concentrating on something that allows them to be lowered into this deep state of relaxation.
So the hypnosis, then, if we had to kind of put a definition around it, one of the components of that definition would be, Neil, that there's a high level of concentration and focus.
The only focus that is there for the client really is to look at something at the beginning, for which is called an eye fixation, which is basically you either stare at a dangling watch perhaps, or your finger, or a point on the ceiling, or whatever, and that sort of concentration on the part of the client. It's a very, very pleasant experience. All you really do is sit in a lovely comfy chair, look at my finger coming towards your face for about 30 seconds, and then that's all you have to do is listen to my voice and follow the instructions and let yourself get more and more relaxed. And as you go on, it'll feel more pleasant, and that's it really. So it's not something where there's a lot of soul searching. Obviously, in Hollywood and stuff, it's always very, very dramatic. You see people wrenching around and going, "Oh no, there's somebody in the room." Oh no, that never happened. I mean, for example, you can speak and you can go memory recall like that. You can do past life regression. You can do all sorts of these things. But I've never had anybody where it's, even if the experience that they're actually remembering was quite horrible, you can distance them from it in such a sense that it's not. They don't have to experience any emotion at all. Personally, I do an idiometer response, which is basically you answer yes or no with your fingers, and so it's a way of directly tapping into the subconscious mind. You do a sort of quite elaborate setup, and then when you ask questions, the person is concentrating on a relaxation scale in this particular technique, and so they're concentrating on going 13. Oh, that's relaxing. 14 is even more relaxing. That's all they're thinking about, and their subconscious mind is making one of their fingers rise to answer yes, and one of the fingers rise to answer no. And that sounds very, very strange, but obviously it does work. It's very, very odd the first time you see it, and it's even odder the first time it actually happens to you. But as I say, it's also a way of not coloring the narrative, not inflicting or putting your own thoughts onto the client, because basically all you do is you ask yes or no questions. So there's no way that you can put a memory into their head or convince them that something's happened that's not, because all you're doing is asking questions. And after a session, usually people feel incredibly relaxed. In fact, usually you have to give them 5 or 10 minutes, because they're basically just going to have a bit of a stretch and get their head back together and then leave and drive home or whatever and such like that. So no, there's not really concentrating on the part of the therapist. There is, because we're certainly in different techniques, you're either sort of reading a script, or you're reacting to the person, or you're trying to reinterpret a scenario. But this depends very much on the technique. I use a form called Curative hypnotherapy, which basically it believes very, very basically that the reaction that you've got, whatever it is, the symptom, be it weight gain, be it biting your nails, being it adult acne or anything, that's a symptom that was a reaction to a certain scenario. A scenario happened when you were an adult and your brain went, I know how to deal with this, and they created this. And it might seem completely disparate and very, very alien to what the actual cause is. Now, what we do is we have symptom, reason, belief, cause. Now, the reason is usually that the brought on this is being embarrassed in front of a crowd, or someone laughed at you on the bus, or something happened that you felt uncomfortable, and then you developed the symptom, be it nail biting, whatever. Now, the school of thought that I come from is that basically, well, lots of people might have been in that circumstance, in a similar circumstance, being embarrassed in front of a classroom or something like that. They don't all develop anxiety, nail biting, depression, or whatever. So that must be that particular person, that reaction was caused by a belief structure that they have about themselves, that this reinforced. They believe something about themselves, usually that they have low self-worth, or that they embarrass themselves in public, or that they're an embarrassment to others, or something very, very negative. And that belief was reinforced by the situation, which then caused the symptom. So what I, as a curative hypnotherapist, have to do, we have to find the initial scenario. We then find the belief that informed that scenario, and then we go back and find the situation that first formed that belief. And so there's usually like 3 or maybe 4, because you sometimes get some that are not right. And what it'll be is, I'll give you an example, okay? And this isn't a real one, because the other thing is that I'm 100% confidential, as you have to be. But this is an example. Playing with kids when you're younger, and one of them says, no, you can't play with us. You're too small. We don't want to play with you. So logically, your brain goes, if I was bigger, physically bigger, then perhaps they would play with me. And then your brain stores that in a file. Many years later, a very, very similar situation will happen that causes the same type of anxiety, the same type of feelings of rejection, and your brain automatically, like a computer, goes back to the last time this happened. How did we deal with this? The problem is all the files have moved around because you're not 6 anymore. So putting bigger shoes on isn't going to trick them anymore or anything like that. So your brain goes to a complete logic and goes, bigger, I'll make myself bigger. And so you might, for example, start to develop weight and get bigger and bigger and bigger, because your brain thinks that that's a way to respond to the circumstance. And then, so this would be perhaps why some people can't think through certain problems. And we'll use the weight as an example, because I know that a lot of people do have a problem. They'll go to the gym, and they'll diet, and they'll do this, and it just won't work, because basically there's some underlying thing that seems to be sabotaging them. Every time, despite your best efforts, you all of a sudden find yourself subconsciously having a bag of crisps or a chocolate bar or something like that. Or your brain goes, you know what, you're so depressed, you've been trying so hard, treat yourself. Or alternatively, you've been doing so well, treat yourself. The reason for that is because your brain thinks that symptom is beneficial, and it's either going to be a protection, a prevention, a punishment, or a warning to yourself or others. That's the school of thought that I come from, is that basically these are the reasons, the 4 reasons that you might have a symptom, and then you've got to basically, as I say, find out. And in that particular case, it would have been a protection. The weight was acting as a protection from those feelings of rejection that she got from the logical interpretation when she was very younger. So once you can remove that belief by saying, well, obviously, as you were a child, you misunderstood what they were saying. That's perfectly okay. You were a child. But if you misunderstood that, then the belief that you learnt is incorrect. Yes. So if the belief is incorrect, then there's no real need for that protection anymore, is there? No, that's correct. So if there's no real need for that protection anymore, can we begin to remove the symptom? Yes, now we can begin to remove the symptom. Can you allow yourself now to lose weight at a safe level? And so that would be how you would reinterpret a scenario in order to allow them to go on, basically.
Now, Neil, do your clients ask you, will one session work, or is this going to be a multiple session type of program? How do you respond to that?
Well, I usually say that unfortunately it is it's how long is a piece of string. I always say, to be fair, that it could take anything. It could take up to 6. It could take 8. It could take numerous sessions, because the way that I do it, you have to reinterpret it. And the first session is basically getting used to visualization, getting used to hypnosis. The second session is setting up the ideometer response and finding it. But there's a thing called conscious interference, which is basically, because this is a new thing, sometimes you'll be listening and your conscious mind will start to interpret things, and you'll start to think ahead and go, oh, this was that scenario, I remember this, and such like that. So occasionally you'll get it wrong and you need to double check, like a double blind experiment. So you need to check on the second session and the third session. By the third session, we're looking for the actual root cause of it. There are certain things that can be dealt with one session, but usually if you've got a problem, if you don't want it to sort of reinterpret and manifest as something else, it's usually about 4 to 5 sessions. It could be more than that. Obviously, what we try and do is you try and get people through as quickly as possible, and also be effective, because you want to help people. They've come to you for help. They've come to you with a problem. You don't want to be a charlatan. You don't want to take advantage of that. You want to help people, and you also want to get a reputation as being somebody that is honourable, and somebody that right. is effective quickly, and such like that. The sorts of things that can be done in one session. Stop smoking, because smoking is usually a habit that's picked up to be in with the in crowd, or to be more adult, or to impress people. So there wasn't really a sort of a cause per se for you to start smoking. It wasn't like a reaction to a trauma or anything like that. I mean, obviously sometimes that can be the case, in which case it can take longer, but smoking usually you can sort out in an hour basically. There's other things that you can do in one session. There's things like stage fright techniques, and affirmations and things like this. There's a thing where it's like an NLP technique, where basically you can give somebody an anchor, which is pinching their fingers together, and it floods them with confidence, makes them feel $1 million and on top of the world. And if anybody ever watches like television and stuff like that, you see the red carpets and such, a surprising amount of actors you'll see with the left hand, they'll pinch their finger and their forefinger and their thumb together just before they go and speak to the news reporters, because it's an incredibly effective technique. It's actually the sort of thing that would be really good for salesmen, or anybody that's got to do sort of like face-to-face customer interfacing and stuff like that. It's really, really good for that. It's great for if you've got nerves before an exam, or a driving test, or something like that. It's just really good for sort of a boost of confidence. But as I say, what it's usually used for, what it was originally intended for, was for stage fright, basically.
Okay, and then the whole premise that you may have to come in for 3, 4, 5 sessions, when many people, I'm guessing, have tried to deal with the issue for maybe 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a minor investment when you think about how long maybe they have struggled with the issue.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's certainly the case. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that it is a viable option, and also an awful lot of people as well have perhaps dealt with circumstances for so long that they feel that's just the way it is, and that perhaps there isn't a solution. And obviously there's also a thing where what some people will be nervous to try something even if they know that it might help, because what if it doesn't? Where am I? Do you know what I mean? It's like you're hurtling towards the ground, and your first parachute won't go. You sometimes think, I'm not going to pull that second parachute, because if I don't, if that one doesn't work, I've got none left. Which obviously doesn't make any logical sense, but you can understand why people would do that. And there's also a stigma attached. This is the thing. It's the 21st century, and there's a real stigma attached to anything concerned with mental health. I mean, I was trying to think of another phrase there, actually, because basically even the sort of phrase mental ill health, it conjures up lots of images, basically. And it's nonsense. If you had a crick in your neck, or if you had a sore leg, you'd go to a physician and you'd get it sorted out. But if you've got internal, emotional pain, or you've got something that you're not happy about yourself, you've got a habitual problem that you feel you just can't cope with on your own, then go and see a hypnotherapist. Like, obviously the most important thing with a hypnotherapist is you've got to have rapport with the person. You've got to trust them. You've got to believe that they can do what they say that they can do. Make sure that they're fully insured. Try and make sure that they're accredited with a reputable hypnotherapy board of governors, and go for it. I mean, there's lots of things that people can do as well that are kind of would be considered more fun, like past life regressions, or guided meditation, or any of these things, or just literally just being put into a trance, because it is very, very pleasant. What you can do I've had people that basically, I've got a really bad back at the minute. Is there any way you can put me in a trance and just relax my muscles? And obviously, it's not a permanent fix, that particular thing. But it works because, as I say, the thing is, your subconscious mind, whilst it's doing all your processes, your heart, your lungs, your internal organs, your circulatory system, everything like this, if we accept that it can affect that, it can affect everything else as well. So it can affect your metabolism. It can affect how much energy you feel that you've got. This is all the things. This is why people that feel depressed feel very lethargic and low and stuff like that. Because basically, as I say, the whole thing sort of, that's where the expression feeling like a black dog's on you, like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Why not give it a go, basically? Because it is incredibly effective. I know, because before I trained as a hypnotherapist, I was in exactly the same position. I had certain anxiety problems, and I thought there's nothing that can be done with this. And it was incredible. The person that I went to see, who ended up teaching me and being my mentor, he was an incredible person, and yeah, he really really helped. So that's kind of, I mean, I would assume that the majority of hypnotherapists have obviously been hypnotized and stuff like that, and I think that quite a lot of them are aware of the beneficial nature of the technique as well. It's one of these things, because it's considered a complementary therapy. There are some people that are very very keen on it, and there are some people that still think it's very Hollywood, because, as I say, usually the times when you'll see anything to do with hypnosis are in the films, if you actually go and see a hypnotherapist or a stage hypnotherapist. And so obviously that's the other thing, the impression that I always get asked by people, are you going to turn me into a chicken? And it's like, well, no, not unless you want me to. Because so that's the therapy scenario. You couldn't do that. You couldn't put somebody in a situation that they felt they were uncomfortable with.
Let me ask you this question, Neil. Some of the audience might be asking, this is very interesting. So how does a typical session work? In other words, what's the process that you go through? How do you get me into that trance state and so on? Just so we can give them a little overview.
Sure. I mean, well, how I would do a trance induction is, as I mentioned before, it's called an eye fixation. I mean, this is where Hollywood has kind of got it right, but they've used different props. It's the look at the follow the watch. You're feeling sleepy. What I would tend to do is get someone to look at my finger and suggest to them that basically their eyes were getting tired. They're to follow my finger and keep their eyes trained right on the tip of my finger. And they'll probably notice that as they're doing this, that their eyes are getting tired, and perhaps they're getting a bit warm. Perhaps their eyelids are starting to feel a bit heavy, and then you move it closer and cause them to concentrate even more. And then you suggest that at any time you would like to close your eyes, and their eyes will close. And then basically what you can do, that is putting someone into a trance. You can put somebody into a trance immediately with a thing called a pattern interrupt, which is basically, I shan't reveal the technique, but it's like bang, and they go directly into deep trance. Unfortunately, you can only do it on people once, because then they'll be expecting it. But that is putting somebody into hypnosis. So that person is therefore hypnotized. The next stage of the therapist's job is to deepen that hypnosis to the point where that you can, say, communicate with them at a subconscious level. So the first thing that I would do is I would suggest that to ignore all the noises outside except for my voice, and just to concentrate on how very comfortable they feel, and then to breathe in deeply and to breathe out. And they'll notice that as they're breathing in, they'll feel very very relaxed, and as they're breathing out, they're releasing all the tension from their body. And then what you can do is you can do countdowns and such like that. And then the next thing is basically to deepen it. So you use either counting down, perhaps you'll use imagery like a ladder or steps or whatever. And then the final thing that you'd be doing is what's called a progressive muscle relaxation, or a PMR. I usually start at the feet and basically get them to concentrate on every part of their body, and it moves up, and as they're concentrating on it, they'll start to feel like they're relaxing, and this lovely feeling will sort of start to envelop the whole body. And the more it envelops, the more relaxed they'll feel, and the deeper they'll go, and the stronger the feeling will go, and this will go round and round and round and round. And basically that's it. I mean, so In the very, very first session, somebody will come in. I'll explain to them how hypnosis works. I'll explain to them what the subconscious mind is. I'll explain to them what can be treated. We'll discuss their problem, figure out exactly what it is that they wish to achieve by this, what would be their end goal. And then I would explain to them how hypnosis feels, alleviate any of their doubts, like, no, I can't go in your pockets whilst you're under and stuff like that. Of course not. Usually in the first session, we would do a bit of imagination work where you go through a meadow and up a hill with a companion of your choice, and then would bring you out of trance. In the next session, we'd set up an idiometer response, which is getting your fingers, and then we'd start to examine regressional techniques by going backwards and backwards and backwards. In the type of curative hypnotherapy, you use the same methodology regardless of the symptom. So if it's pulling your hair out, if it's anxiety, if it's depression, if it's weight gain, if it's alopecia, if it's anything like that, you use the exact same technique. What you have to do is something that's called an agreed wording problem. And because that's how the person understands their problem. Now, I'll give you an example. Somebody that I heard of that was being treated was this isn't a real case. This is a test scenario that was used to explain it. They had irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. I don't know if it's perhaps got a different name in America, but cramping of the stomach and like certain foods disagree with you and such like that.
No, it's IBS here too.
Oh,
yeah.
is it? Right, cool. And basically, she'd had this since she was very, very young. Now, she said to the hypnotherapist, I've got IBS. And then she sort of, and a good hypnotherapist or a good therapist, because the thing you've got to remember is you're a hypnotist and you're a therapist. So you're there a lot of the time just to be an ear to listen. You mustn't sympathize, you must empathize. You mustn't go, oh God, that's right, it's terrible. You must go, no, I understand. Don't worry, we can help you. But basically, because she'd had this IBS problem since she was about 5, and now she's 30, she doesn't know it as IBS. She knew it as her tummy troll, which sounds silly, but basically, because that's how she understood her problem, her tummy troll, that's what we had to treat. And so we treated her tummy troll, so we reinterpreted it, and basically use that agreed wording to remove the tummy troll. So that removed the symptom, and that actually alleviated the symptoms of the IBS. So it was a very successful case. But that's the point. So if basically people are sat there and going, yeah, but this is a silly problem, I call it this, or this is daft. Again, the two things that I'd reiterate is it's 100% confidential, and I've never really been shocked by anything. Do you know what I mean? There's never been anything that anybody's come to me and I've gone, oh my God, because there isn't. This is the other thing. People tend to think that they're, and not to denigrate their problems, but people tend to worry that they are exclusive in this and they're different to everybody else, and that they're just, there's something wrong with them, and that's not the case. This is something that can be fixed, basically.
Yeah, that the issue is unique to them and them only.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Now, Neil, what kinds of issues can hypnosis help with? You've mentioned a couple of smoking and weight release. What other types of issues can you help clients with?
Well, pretty much anything. That sounds a bit arrogant. Like a surprising amount of things, emotional and what could be considered physical responses. For example, things like adult acne, psoriasis. I know people, I personally haven't treated, but I know people that, and I've seen the results. Skin problems, anger issues, emotional problems like depression, anxiety, lack of self-esteem.
How about phobias?
Absolutely, phobias. Yeah. Phobias can be fear of flying, stage fright, that sort of thing. Pretty much anything that you feel that is causing is a detriment to you, anything that would be considered something that either is a habit that you just can't seem to kick, like overeating, like self-harm, like pulling your hair out, anything that's a phobia that you don't want to get, like fear of snakes, fear of flights, fear of the number 13, fear of public spaces, public speaking, or anything that you would consider an emotional problem, like depression, anxiety, giggling, blushing, anything like that can be dealt with. Sexual problems. The only stipulation is that basically you have to have a wording for it. Now, there are some things obviously that you can't treat, and you wouldn't obviously treat. People came to you with certain illnesses and stuff like that. You know, you can't hypnotize an illness away, and it would be immoral and unethical to even try. So obviously you have to draw the line somewhere, but there is a surprising amount of things. Usually, as to say, if it's a habit, if it's something you're afraid of, if it's something that you just want help with or you want to improve, then hypnosis can be incredibly effective for it.
How about pain, Neil? Clients that come in with pain.
Pain's an interesting one because it depends on what's causing it. Some of it is because, you know, we discussed about how your subconscious mind is your metabolism. Obviously, the way you stand, the way you hold yourself, all of these things can be structured by your metabolism. As a very extreme example, you could hunch yourself down or pull your shoulders in or something because you're trying to make yourself small because for whatever reason you've got lack of self-esteem or something like that. So certain pain, chronic pains and things like that, back pains, yes. If there's a cause of that pain, you can't make somebody superhuman. If the cause of the pain is that their arm's broken, or that they've got something growing inside them, or they've got a piece of shrapnel that's digging into a nerve ending, you can't. And again, it would be immoral and unethical to say that nerve no longer works. And again, we're hypnotists. We're not black magicians. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. But certain things, yes, you could help. You could help with certain neuralgias, certain postural causes of pain, certain other things that are basically, because all pain is a synaptic response, or is a chemical response to a signal that's by the brain. So yes, pain can be dealt with, although some things you really shouldn't be. But I think that's obviously, it's more a sort of common sense thing. Like if somebody comes to you and go, I've got this pain in my gut and it keeps swelling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you need to go to a doctor. That's not something that should be treated with hypnotherapy at all. But yes, certain pains can be treated. And the other things that you can do certain things like make people more, say if you're learning an instrument or something like that, more motivation. You can you know, again, you can't turn somebody into Slash by basically you are now Slash, but what you can do is you can basically say, okay, you've got like an anxiety about the guitar, you look at it and it's all complicated and there's too many frets and the neck's all big and you don't know where your fingers to go and it all becomes a bit too much. So what you could do is you could put in either a confidence anchor or something like that, or you could do it curatively, where basically you would remove the reason that they believe that they can't do. Because some people, for example, like, oh, I'll never get good at this because I'm not the sort of person that's good at that sort of thing. That's a subconscious belief. That's a habitual form belief that can be dealt with curative hypnotherapy. Or if, as I say, you wanted to, you know, I play guitar, but to be honest, I'm playing at this Shea Stadium, and I'm really, really nervous. Okay, well, we'll give you a confidence boost or something like that. We could do that. But this is the point. It is an incredibly versatile and effective method of treatment. There are certain things that sometimes I get quite frustrated because you see people that are suffering with certain problems. They have anxiety, they have depression, they have agoraphobia, issues like that, confidence issues and stuff like that. And you just think, you know, please, you can't drag people off the streets, but you just think, you know, please let me show you that there is something that can be done for you. I mean, very much again depends on your problems. Sometimes it might be just counseling that's required, for example. But if you're finding that counseling doesn't help, or if you're finding that basically it's almost like there's something inside you that's stopping you, or that something out of your control sparks this reaction, this symptomatic reaction, whatever it is, be it fear of the color red, chewing the skin around your fingers, twisting your hair and eating it, anything like that. If there's something that you just don't understand why it's happening and you want to change it, then go and see a hypnotherapist.
Now, to get them back to understand the issue, the anchor, and the triggers,
Yeah.
is that a process of regression? Do you take them back in time? What do you do there?
It's not back in time per se. The way that I would do it is you basically go, the first time you look at a scenario, you look at it on a television screen, and then the second time you look at it and you go, okay, so you're going to be watching this television screen, you're watching your favorite program. Now, in a second, the image is going to change, and there's going to be a scenario happening, and there's going to be somebody there, and I don't know how old they are, but what's happening to them is rather similar to the thing that first started you on the path to the need, the creation, the generation of this symptom. And then they look at the scene and tell you yes or no, tell you what's going on. And you go, okay, fair enough. And that's the start point. Then we get into the ideometer response. And so what you would do is you go, okay, so this scenario that first caused you to create this symptom, that first put you on the path for the need, the creation of this anxiety, did it happen before you were 30 years old? And you get a yes, no response. And so just by answering with the yes, no, did it happen before you were 20 years old? Did it happen before you were 15 years old? No. Did it happen before you were 17 years old? Yes. Did it happen before you were 16 years old? Did it happen when you were 16? Brilliant. Was it an indoor scenario or was it an outdoor scenario? An outdoor scenario. Was it a park? Was it a forest? Was it a school ground? Was it something like that? And by this, you slowly chip away at the scenarios to go through those four things. And so you have to build up a picture of these incidents that have happened. And once you've got to the very sort of earliest one, what you do is, like we were saying with it's what's called a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong. Because you're right, something bad happened, but you're wrong because you've interpreted it incorrectly. Now, it's not because you were stupid, it's because you were young or because it was a new scenario or something. So like with that, we don't want to play with you, you're too little. You're right. They didn't want to play with you. You're a young kid, but you're wrong. It wasn't because of your size. It was for something completely different that was not your fault. And it was completely out of your control. So you have to reinterpret that. The other thing that people worry about is two things. That A, what if I don't come out of trance? And B, the other thing that people always worry about is, are you going to be able to control my mind? Or am I going to, are you going to be able to do anything nefarious? And the answer to that is no. Mike, if hypnotherapists could do that, me and you would be in the Bahamas right now, right? Wouldn't we?
We would.
I'd be making everybody in the street give me their PIN number, and me and you would be there, probably locked into a sort of battle of the mind, going, "It's your round, Mike. You go and get the drinks." No, it's your round, Neil. Because we're not doing that. You've got to assume that we're not. That can't be done. And the other thing I always say when people come to my office is, say, please, take a look around. If you can find the room with all the stacked up bodies of people that haven't come out of trance, then please do. But no, everybody enjoys it. And everybody comes out of trance, and I think everybody that I've treated, and everybody that I know that's ever experimented with hypnotherapy, even just basically to see what it's like, has found it to be actually very, very beneficial for them.
Yeah, sometimes the question I get is, in a joking way, is, well, will you be able to get me to tell my deep, dark secrets?
Yes. No, not unless you want to, because that's the other thing that, everybody's always. I have a friend, and he won't even let me put him into trance because he's terrified that I'm going to either tinker with his head or he's going to blurt out something like, "I've always loved you, Neil," and it's like, it's not going to happen. Like, the other thing is that I often get clients coming to me saying, "I know what the cause of my problem is," and my response to that is, you might, but the likelihood is that if you know about it, it's a conscious memory. Now, we're not dealing with conscious memories, are we? We're dealing with subconscious memories. So the likelihood is that it might not be that thing that you can remember, because they'll say, "I was in a car crash when I was younger and I've lost confidence since then." It probably isn't that, because that's a conscious thought. However, if it is that, which again it could be, it'll be something about that you'd never thought of. For example, not that you were in a car crash, but that you, for some strange reason, felt guilty about being in that car crash. So it was some aspect of that situation that, again, is totally subconscious. 9 times out of 10, when I get the reinterpreted situation, the people always say, I haven't thought about that in years. I remember that. And it was like, it was that was it. I remember it now. And then basically, the other thing is that you get it's very, very nice to see when you're successful. You often get an abreactive response. Abreaction is basically, it's like a cathartic release of all that pent up feeling. And so when you bring people out of the trance, you see a physical change in people. You see they look brighter, they look happier, they lift their shoulders. Often people get a sensation like rising through the top of the head, like almost like the worry or the issue has been literally torn out of them, and it's quite a sort of. I had one person say, I almost felt like, in the Highlander where he gets the quickening and it lifts him off the ground. He said it almost felt like that. He almost felt like he was floating, and he said it feels kind of like a sort of rising sensation through the chest. I've had people that have come in and basically, when they were first explaining their problem, which was shyness, they were so shy that it was hard for them to talk to me, and they were actually crying as they were telling me that, oh, my problem is I'm shy, and they felt that they were taking up my time. When we'd reinterpreted it, the first thing that she did was tell me a dirty joke and start flirting with me. Now that's one, you can see some fabulous reactions. I've had people that haven't walked out, that haven't been outside in public because they're nervous of their appearance or whatever for years, and we finished the session early, and it's like, oh, my husband's not come to pick me up yet. Well, okay, fine. Would you like to come and sit in the kitchen? We'll have a cup of coffee and a chat, whatever. And they go, no, you know what? I feel like walking. I'm going to go down to the centre of town and go and look around the shops. And they've not done that in years. And so when you get to see that, and you see the response, it is an incredibly rewarding experience, basically. So, it's a really nice. It's nice to fall into something like this because basically, you say, it is very, very helpful, but it is also quite gratifying that you can see the positive results of your actions.
Now, I do get questions from clients, Neil, that ask you, what do they have to do, if anything, to prepare for the session? How do you respond to that question?
Nothing. You don't have to do anything. You just have to turn up on time and sit there and have a lovely relax. The only thing that you stipulate is basically, please listen to what the hypnotist says and just go along with me and follow my instructions. Sometimes you get people who think that they've seen it on the television or whatever, and so they try and think a step ahead of you, and they go, oh, I see what he's trying to do, and do you know what I mean? And so you just basically say, hey, it's fine. No, that's perfectly great. I understand what you're trying to do, but you don't need to do that. That's my job. You don't need to do anything. All you need to do is basically be able to explain what your problem is, be able to explain what it is that you would like to achieve, and to get on with me. I mean, basically, any ethical hypnotherapist or any ethical therapist or any ethical practitioner of any complementary therapy will basically give you an opportunity on the first thing to explain everything to you and make sure you're comfortable before you ask for any money, before you can, you basically say that, yes, we're going to go through therapy, because you've got to, again, the whole point of this is we're trying to help people. Do you know what I mean? So so the best way is to treat people with respect and to understand that this is a therapeutic session, and so be nice to people, be pleasant to people, and give them the opportunity to fully explain everything. And if you develop that rapport, it's going to work a lot better, basically, as well, and it's going to be more effective. And usually, so the way that the curative hypnotherapy works is that the concept is that once you've removed the belief, the symptom, then you go through all the things. The symptom, once it's gone, won't return because there's no need for it. You don't need that protection, that prevention, that warning, or that punishment anymore. It's gone, so there's no need for it to manifest somewhere else. There are certain techniques that can be done whereby, and again, this is only a theory because there are some people that are very, very successful with other things, but the point is that some people believe that basically you need to address the underlying reason rather than the actual symptom. The symptom, whatever it is a response to something else that's happened. And so if you just use, say, forward positive projection, or just tell somebody that they don't need that anymore and don't address the underlying problem, there is a chance that it could manifest somewhere else, basically. And so, again, different therapists have different schools of thought, but I tend to like to do that because I found that the symptom doesn't return. It just doesn't return.
Do you get a small minority of clients, Neil, that block or resist? In other words, they don't go into trance, and it's because maybe they have racing thoughts, or they're doing what you said before. They're trying to get ahead of you, so they're not really listening to you.
Yeah,
They are,
sometimes. I mean, like I've
yeah,
had occasions where I had one occasion where a client would go to sleep in trance, and basically the thing is, I just had to think on my feet, and basically, well, okay, we'll bring him out of, we'll wake him up, tell him to go and wash his face, and then we'll do another thing, but with a decidedly lower level of relaxation. To be quite
right,
honest, because hypnosis isn't sleeping, usually if people fall asleep, it's because they're very, very tired, or because they're actually consciously resisting, or something like that. You can get conscious resistance. I found a lot of with certain people whilst I was training they would consciously resist or they would try and think ahead or whatever. But usually when people tend to come to see you because they have a vested interest, because they've basically got some reason to, they're not gonna try and resist. If you wanted to resist, you could sit there and go, no, 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 I'm not listening to you, and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's a rather expensive way of proving a hypothesis, isn't it, basically? So I've never had any situation whereby basically I couldn't get somebody to transfer, we couldn't treat them at all. What I would do is basically, if there was just physically no way of treating somebody, I'd be fair with them and say, look, something's happening, perhaps you don't really want to do this, okay, or perhaps we don't get on, or whatever, okay. And so in that scenario, you just say, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll recommend another hypnotherapist for you, and if you'd like to go to them, or if you'd like to go away and come back a few weeks later, that's perfectly okay, is what I would do. I've never really had a problem, because as I say, most people well, everyone that comes to see you, they come to see you for help. I've done certain guided meditations where certain aspects of it couldn't be seen by the client, which was very, very strange, because they could see, I'd put them in a time machine and they could describe the inner workings of the time machine and tell me what the door looked like and tell me what this is. And when they went to the porthole to look out and stuff to see where they were meditating to, it was just fog.
right.
And then I got them to open the door, that was just fog. Got them to change the channel on the television, it's just fog. Everything else they could see vividly, and they could feel themselves floating and flying, and they could describe this fictional machine that they were in and stuff like that, but they couldn't just see that bit. So that was a bit of a mystery to me, that one. But no, not really. As I say, the usual sort of thing is that basically, have you ever done the autopilot thing whilst driving? Have you ever cried at a film? Then there's really no reason to think that you couldn't be hypnotized if you allow me to. If you want to sit there and resist it, of course, as we've said before, this isn't an assault on the senses or anything. It's very much sort of a way to guide somebody into relaxation.
Now, Neil, with smoking cessation,
Yeah.
what if the client calls you and says, look, I want to quit smoking, but the reason why I want to quit
Mm.
is because my spouse is on my case or my kids are on my case? In other words, they're not really perceiving it as big a problem as perhaps
Yeah.
their family is. So how does that work?
Well,
They want to come in and see you to quit smoking, but they're
pers-
not really committed.
Well, personally, I would say you're welcome to come in for the actual to discuss it, but I won't treat you and I won't take any money off you, because that's not fair. You need to want to quit smoking. Again, like, we're not hypnotherapists can't control your mind and make you do something. We can't turn you into something else. We can't change the world. What we can do is change your reaction to the world and change the way that you deal with certain stimuli. With smoking, what I always say is, do you want to quit smoking? Do you really want to quit smoking? Is it your decision, and why? So I've refused many clients who say, no, I don't really want to, but I need to. I said, well, no, because as I say, it needs to come from you. If you want to stop smoking, yes, an hour is all that's required to stop you smoking, and you won't want to smoke again. Now, if you pick up a cigarette, or if you get drunk and decide, oh yeah, I've just one, there is a distinct possibility that could re-trigger your addiction, and basically you'll be back to the way you were when you started. Now, what I always tend to say, and this is usually sort of standard practice, is basically if you have a relapse within 6 months, say, we'll come back and we'll do it again for a fraction of the cost, because basically, obviously, that I would see that as perhaps I didn't do my job as well, and we want to do, we want to make you happy. But no, with smoking cessation, you need to want to do it. You can't. But this is what we were saying earlier. Hypnotherapists and hypnotists, they're not. It's not like Rasputin or Svengali or anything like that. We're not creating mind controlled zombies or something like that. It's a therapeutic technique, and it's ultimately in the client's hand. If they don't want to be hypnotized, they don't have to. If they don't like it, they can stand up. But if, as I say, with something like smoking, you can't really force somebody, no. And the ethical thing to do is to basically refuse them as a client.
Now, do you work with alcohol?
Yes, but I do it as a curative thing. I don't do it as like I'll do it in the sort of several sessions thing, because usually I'd suggest that alcohol, everyone likes to drink. You're reacting to alcohol in a way that is not usual, or it is not beneficial to you. Something seems to have gripped you. So I'm aware that you can do sort of shorter things, but I would do alcohol cessation or drug cessation. I've done a drug rehabilitation, so to speak. Obviously nothing with physical withdrawal symptoms, but certain stimulants and certain other relaxants. I've helped people to get off with very good results, because personally, alcoholism I would do over a series of treatments.
I find that alcoholism is a little tricky because if it's dependency, that becomes a lot more difficult. And I'm speaking from my perspective.
Yeah.
If it's binge drinking where, they can go weeks, months without having an alcohol problem, then they go out for the weekend or Friday, Saturday, and they get themselves clobbered, and they don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. That's obviously easy. The other thing is, like, as I say with anything, you always need to check what medication people are on. And if there's anything like that, like a drug dependency, like an alcohol or a chemical dependency, or anything that you do two things, and the responsible hypnotherapist will do these two things. First, they'll tell you to check with your GP or your doctor or your specialist or whatever, and until they've got that say so, you won't proceed, because you don't want to hurt people or do anything that would be adverse to, like, some people, if they stop drinking straight away, it's going to be a massive problem for them. So you need to make sure that that's not going to be the case. And the second thing to do is basically check with your insurance company, that basically, because they'll tell you what you are able to do and what you're not able to do. And so again, it's like anything. You're constantly learning. So check things, check the textbooks, check to see if there's a different methodology that could be do this. Phone other hypnotherapists and ask them and say, what is this? Have you had this response before? Have you ever treated somebody like that? What is it to expect? But that's the thing. It's a therapeutic thing, and it's a care for the client thing. So you've always, that's the fundamental underlying thing, is what's the best for the client. It obviously it is a job, but that's not why you do things like this. You know what I mean? We've not become a hypnotherapist to become a millionaire. You've become a hypnotherapist because basically this is something that hopefully we're quite good at, and it's good, it's useful, it's something that's nice. You know what I mean? If we wanted to trick people out of money, we'd do that thing where you pull organs out of people's body, or become like, a traveling evangelist or something like that. There's easier ways to do it. This is something, I say, that can be incredibly useful.
Now, Neil, the other question I had here was, do you work with adolescents?
Yes, teenagers. I don't tend to like working with children. I've tried, because
Children, you meaning pre-adolescents?
Yeah, and I'll tell you for why, right? Because you tend to get into a scenario sometimes where you're trying to do something for the parent of that child rather than the child, and often there's a thing called secondary benefit that you have to think about with hypnosis, which is basically some people will come to you and go, I've got this problem. And the reason that they don't get rid of the problem is because they're getting something out of it. For example, somebody might have, and again, I'm not trying to have a go at anybody, but there are conceivable scenarios where somebody might develop some sort of thing that they feel is a detriment because it gets them attention, or it makes them exciting, or it means that they can't leave home, or it means that their partner can't leave them, or it means that people treat them nicer, for example. And so there's certain things that are like that. And sometimes with children, you get into a very, very difficult situation where it's like, is this child got something, a habitual problem that needs solving, or has this child just figured out that if he acts this way, then he gets what he wants? And sometimes I just don't want to be in the, I know of people who've got into scenarios where basically they've turned around and said, there's nothing wrong with your child, he's trying it on, and you need to discipline your child better and be a parent and get off your behind and actually act up and stop trying to look to other people to solve your lack of problem. And so I tend to avoid children purely because of that. I had one person, this is the strangest thing that's ever been requested of me. Somebody phoned me up and said, can I hypnotize their son to see if their wife had hypnotized them to hate him? I was like, what? I don't know where to begin with that one. You can't do that for a start. She wouldn't have been able to do that over a weekend. What do you mean hate you? Have you not considered that perhaps she's lavished him with presents and spent the entire week pouring poison into his ear? And so this is the problem, is that basically when somebody comes with somebody else to get someone else help, you've got two people's ideas of what they want to get out of it, and they often don't jibe. Like if somebody brought their wife to me, for example, or something, and said, make her more sexually confident, I'd tell them to get out the door, because basically, no, I'm not with the, do you know what I mean? You're there again for the client. You're not there for the benefit of somebody else. Like, please make my girlfriend stop going on at me and nagging at me. No, it doesn't work like that. And again, it would be, A, you can't do it, B, it's immoral, C, it's unethical. So, but children is a difficult one. There are people that specialize in children, and you say children can be hypnotized, and there can be some certain scenarios where it's incredibly useful. Personally, I don't tend to like to get into it because I'm not working on a trauma ward or anything like that, or anything where basically you're going to get sort of serious problems like that. It can be sort of parents that want something other than what they've got basically, and so it's tricky.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I have experienced situations myself where at least my perspective was that the parent was actually creating or putting an issue on the child. Let's just say a teenager.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the teenager doesn't view themselves as having that issue.
No, because This is the point. They're not fitting the worldview of their parents, so...
Exactly. So they want to bring the child in, but the child's not going to be cooperative because the kid is not really believing that they have this issue. They're only there because their parent has dictated that they be at the session. Yeah. So it's not going to work. Now, the other thing with pre-adolescents, with children, they have sometimes a problem just understanding the process.
Yes.
You're trying to get them acclimated, and then they have a problem with relaxing and focusing in an unfamiliar setting, and it becomes very, very difficult because it's not intuitive to them.
No,
it really
of course. And the other thing is vocabulary and stuff of a child, because if you're explaining to somebody complicated, did you have feelings of despair? Well, I don't know what despair is. As a sort of 6-7-year-old, they've got a vocabulary of happy, sad,
right, exactly.
etc. So pinpointing distinct emotions and such like that is very, very tricky. And also, you forget when you're a child as well, because of your vocabulary, expressing what's happened in a certain circumstance, like a complex situation where I saw mummy shouting at daddy and it made me feel guilty because I thought that, but that's difficult for a child to explain all those different complicated adult emotions. So no, I'd avoid working with children. And obviously there are people that specialize in that. I'd suggest go and see them if you want to.
How important is imagination in the process of hypnosis?
Well, it's good to be able to visualize things. The thing is about visualization is that basically different people have different sort of methods. Some people get, like, imagine the Stars and Stripes, okay? Everyone's imagining it now. Some people have got an incredibly vivid, and it's flapping in the wind, and it's got the gold fringes on it, and there's a blue sky with clouds behind it, and there's a gold pole, and there's even soldiers saluting it and stuff like that. Some people will just get a vague idea oh yeah, I understand what a flag is. And so that's the other thing. It's in getting in somebody else's head and understanding their interpretation of it. Imagination, it can be very, very helpful. It's good to be able to visualize stuff, but most people can visualize things anyway. Most people tend, you say something and an image of it pops up in their head, basically. So,
Right.
but if people have trouble with that, there are certain other ways that you can do. You just don't so heavily rely on that and rely more on intuition, really. Because, as I say, because we're sort of tuning in at the beginning, and if this, oh, I can't see anything, you go, okay, fair enough. What we're going to do is we're just going to answer yes, no questions. And I don't want you to think about it. I want the first answer that comes into your head. Is it indoors? Yes. Excellent. And that's how you do it. So there are different ways. Some people, as I say, you won't be able to hypnotize them, and you won't be able to do this because they're resisting. Most people you should be able to hypnotize them, and there's no real reason that they shouldn't, unless they don't want to, or unless they're worried that you're going to uncover something or you're going to embarrass them. But then, to be quite honest, that's probably your fault as the therapist, because you've not put them at ease, you've not created the right scenario, the right environment, you've not explained yourself well. I'll tell you what is strange, Mike. I don't know whether you found this, but I found that sometimes hypnosis on people that you're very close with doesn't really work. Like my girlfriend, she can be hypnotized by other people, and I can put her into a trance, but then when you start doing other things, it doesn't work. And I think what it is because she knows me so well, she's trying to think ahead of me, so to speak. And
Yeah.
the person that taught me said that he tried experiments on his wife. Basically, they says, "Oh, let's see if we can make your arm go stiff," and just things like that. And it would never work because she'd start giggling. And so sometimes there can be like a crux that causes, because you are so close, it's an embarrassment factor and certain things like that. But that's probably because you're not the correct person for that person to be seeing as a therapist. They're perhaps be more suited to go and see somebody else. But that's kind of like singing in front of your auntie. Do you know what I mean? Like even professional singers. Oh, I'm all right on say on a stage in front of a crowd of 1,000 strangers, but you want me to sing to my gran? No, that's mortifyingly embarrassing, and so it's the same sort of thing, really. So that has been a problem. Well, that was a scenario, and I've had other friends that just don't like it, and so they basically, you're halfway through the induction and they just go, it's not for me, and they stand up and walk away. But again, that's because that was again the all these scenarios have been when I've been training, or when I've been basically saying to somebody, would you mind if I tried this or something like that.
Yeah.
So as I say, the impetus, that's kind of why you have to charge so much for smoking cessation. It's not expensive when you think what you get out of it, and you think of the actual cost of cigarettes, but it's more expensive for a single session than a single session of curative hypnotherapy or whatever. And the reason for that is, again, you've got to have an emotional sort of attachment to it. If you turn up with the thought of, oh, I might as well give this a go, then it's not going to work because you don't have anything invested in it. And so that tends to be why smoking cessation usually is slightly more expensive than the other things that a hypnotherapist would offer, because if you want to quit, you've got to really want to quit, and that
Right.
if you're willing to shell out your time, your money, etc., then it shows that you actually have the drive to want to do it. Because if basically you said, oh, it's free, everybody would turn up and nobody would stick to it, because why would they? They've not lost anything, if they, so to speak. And so this is the other thing you've got to tend to do.
Going back to friends and family, I think the other issue is that other than the fact they know you,
Yeah.
and there is that dynamic that you were talking about. The other part of it, I think, is that you're not the practitioner, you're not the therapist.
Yeah.
You're Neil, you're Mike,
Yeah.
and I know who you are, and so I think that's part of that problem also.
I think you're absolutely right. If they think of you as a skilled practitioner or a therapist or something like that, the thing is as well, it's not an authoritarian thing, in as much as like you're not there like sort of stood over them. Like there's a friendliness to it, but you're absolutely right. They need to basically think of you as the person that's going to help me rather than John.
Your friend,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That is, but still, it can be done. It very much to say it depends on the person and such like that.
Now, with weight management, Neil,
Hmm.
when a client comes to you and says, "How quickly will I lose weight?"
How quickly did you put the weight on? But like the thing is, this is one thing that I'm very, very clear on when people I said the weight loss, it works, but what won't happen is you won't wake up out of the trance when we've reinterpreted the final situation and discover that you're a size 0, right? What will happen with weight loss, like we discussed earlier, basically what tends to happen is that you either eat as a response to a situation, like a comfort eating or in times of stress or as a reward or whatever, and there tends to be something that just seems out of your control. If you're going to the gym or whatever, it just doesn't seem to work. And again, the school of thought that I come from is that that's because your brain and your metabolism is actively stopping that from happening. So what we do is we get people to the point where basically they don't have that mental block impinging them. And that sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but I can only go off the clients that I've had where basically as soon as we've got to that bit, they feel like it's not a problem anymore. They feel like they can actually do it. And then from there on, just food isn't the big crutch that it was before, and so they don't tend to do it. What we tend to do is once you've had the reinterpretation, you tend to wait 2 weeks and then have the client come back, and basically you then do a sort of yes, no, and double check everything. But the most important thing is to ask the client, how do you feel? How have you been getting on? And so what you'll tend to find with people with weight loss and stuff is that they'll just feel generally happier and more positive, and they'll just kind of get the feeling that there is sort of light at the end of the tunnel. They'll perhaps be able to, I've gone for walks, I left my chips, I went out for a meal, and I've never done that before, but I felt full halfway through and so I didn't finish it. And from that point on, there's nothing that the brain's doing to stop you losing weight at a safe level. What a lot of people do these things where they, for example, I'm quite dubious of this gastric band thing. Do you get that in America? This like hypnotic
Well, they
gastric.
do it here, yeah.
I'm not sure about that. It's incredibly expensive, and I always tend to get the impression that it'll probably work immediate, like initially, and then later, because again, you've not addressed the underlying cause. Now, I suppose
Right.
again that very much depends on your school of thought, of the methodology. But I would imagine that the majority of people that have these hypnotic gastric band things, perhaps 6 months down the line, suddenly start to notice that it's not working anymore. I don't know. I know of a few people that do it and they charge an absolute fortune, and they seem to be making claims that seem a little over the top. I could be wrong. I don't know. It could be incredibly effective. It could be one. Again, that kind of boils down to what your thoughts about hypnosis are as well. Because, like, I suppose if you did it well enough, and I'm sure there are certain people out there that are able to do it and make it stick. But I'd be happier with a client if they wanted to sort the underlying symptom, because it's like if you've got measles, putting a heavy layer of foundation on doesn't mean that you've not got the measles anymore. It just means that everyone can't see the symptom of measles, and so that's not really solving anything. But that's you've got to be again fair with the weight loss thing and stuff, and say, look, with all of it, you've got to manage your client's expectations. Basically, we can make you have self-esteem, but that's not going to turn you into I don't know, who's incredibly confident. It's not going to turn you into a rock star like the second that you wake up. That's a starting point, and you'll feel better about yourself. But yeah, you've not got to be unrealistic. You're not going to drop the weight, and it wouldn't be safe to do that. Basically, it's safe
Right.
to lose about 1 to 2 pounds a week, month, I forget. I think it's one pound a week, 1.5 pounds a week. I think that's like the safe level. Any more than that, it's not healthy for people. So you've got to, and this is the thing, it takes a long time to actually put that weight on. It's going to take a bit of time for that weight to come off. It's just that basically you've now got the tools to be able to do that, and there's nothing that's going to be instinctually stopping you or sabotaging you or anything like that.
Well, it's also for the clients, for those that are listening, and it has a lot to do with how much weight you want to release. It's your body structure. It's your metabolism. Are you exercising, and what's your age? I've had clients come to me, and maybe they're in their 50s, and they'll say, well, I want to weigh what I weighed when I was 20,
Well,
21.
yeah, exactly. That's not going to happen because your body's not the same anymore. Like,
Exactly.
but that's like if somebody came to me and basically said, "I'm 50. I want to be 19." So I'm sure you do. So do I. I'm terribly sorry. We can't change the world. We can change your reaction to the world and how you deal with stimulus. That's what we can change, basically. So yeah, you've got to be realistic about people's expectations and stuff like that. And then, what's really interesting as well, right? Confidence, self-esteem, and anxiety are not interchangeable. You could be for example, I've had clients that basically come and say, I've got anxiety. And then you get rid of that and they say, well, I'm still not feeling very confident. And so you sort that out. And they say, I've still not got much self-esteem. And so you sort that out well. And basically once you've got the three things, because it depends on how the person understands it. You could be very, very confident on the outside, but actually quite an anxious person or quite low self-esteem. And you've got this confident exterior as a brash sort of shield to the world. You could be very shy and anxious, but actually incredibly self-assured, but you just don't sort of put it out there and stuff like that. So often things that perhaps would seem like the flip side of the same coin, dependent on the client's interpretation of it, could be three separate things. The good thing is that usually, basically, because you've set up the ideometer response, you've got the visualization going, you understand the things and the blah 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 blah. If somebody came to me for anxiety and then came back the next week and basically said, okay, the anxiety is sorted, but now I've got low self-esteem, you're basically 60 to 75% already through that. So basically it shouldn't take terribly long. You probably be able to get that anxiety in the same session. So it wouldn't be like, okay, start again. We're going to have another 4 sessions. It's a continuation of it basically. And you're sort of more honing the actual wording so that the client finally gets that, yes, that's how I wanted to feel, basically.
Okay, well, this has been a great discussion, Neil, really. It's great talking to a fellow hypnotherapist and getting your insights and your perspective. Now, your clients, how can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me. My website is nottinghamhypnosis.com. The actual name of my hypnotherapy company is called Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy. I have a Facebook page, and I'd be incredibly grateful if anybody could go on the Facebook page for Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy, which is linked through my Facebook pages and stuff like that. And please take a look. I've got a website with testimonials on there and certain things. If anybody wants to phone up for any questions, I'm very friendly. My number's all on the website. If people want, questions or discussion about what could be treated, what might be able to help them, what if, anything really, please give me a ring. Also, some people might know me through the Neil Sanders Mind Control thing and my Facebook. With that, you can also link to it that if you go on neilsandersmindcontrol.com, I believe there's a link to the Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy on there. So I'd be incredibly grateful if everyone could just go on my website and go on the Facebook and stuff like that, because obviously, as you know, Mike, it's one of these sort of things where the more people go on it, the more it goes up Google, etc., etc., etc.
Exactly.
And that's sort of I'm trying to make this a success. So but those are the main places. nottinghamhypnosis.com, which is also called Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy, also Facebook Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy, and Facebook Neil Sanders, and neilsandersmindcontrol.com.
All right, Neil, thank you so much. I'm so glad you came back on the show because whenever you're on, your interviews, people watch them. They love them.
Well, that's because I've got a good interviewee, and it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. So you make it very easy.
And with those kind words, that concludes my interview with Neil Sanders, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Neil's hypnosis website, Peace of Mind Hypnotherapy, can be found at nottinghamhypnosis.com. The link is also in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, if you get a moment, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.